Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now.
Welcome back, everybody, to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook. This week we have special guests, Jim and Jessica Braz, the authors of the book Baby Out of Wedlock. Today we're going to discuss navigating custody and paternity. So welcome, guys. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
I like that the two of you have written this book because it really approaches as a subject that is kind of underlying. It's just not right at the surface of the issues around custody. I mean, certainly this is something that's out there that's huge, but the statistics, you know, when I started to write my material and looking at with what I've put out there, I was really looking at divorces and the children involved in divorces, and the statistics there are huge. But this piece about paternity that you've researched in terms of the number of babies that are born out of wedlock a year, I think you said something like 1.5 million.
Yeah, we were shocked. We punched it up on the CDC website, and right there's a study, 2018. It says 40% of all children born in the United States are unmarried parents, and that's 1.5 million kids. And there's only about 800,000 divorces each year. So it's really almost double the number of divorces.
Right. And the divorces have kind of gone down, but the rate of marriage has gone down as well. Yeah. So we've got this differing demographic that's starting to unfold. And this is an important subject because a lot of the children that are born out of wedlock are, some of them are from committed couples. They're people that are married that want to have children and that are committed, and they're going through this. But I'm guessing that the vast majority of that is in the other category of surprise.
Yeah.
Oops.
And then, or oops. And then how do we navigate that? Because we're working with people that we don't really know and we don't have history from. So yeah, this is awesome because I haven't seen any place that this has really been addressed. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys because this is an important aspect of.
Thank you, Brooke. I'll say real quick, we started writing this last year and during COVID, and it came about because we had our babies out of wedlock about 10 years ago. Before we were married to each other, we each had children with other people that we didn't want to marry. And over the last decade, we've constantly had questions from friends and family. People say, oh, my cousin, my brother, so-and-so got his girlfriend pregnant or vice versa, and they need some advice. Can they talk to you? And after 10 years of that, I turned to Jessica and said, we should write a book about this. And so that's how this started about a little over a year ago. And as we dug into it and wrote an outline and started to make some progress, we realized that we needed some more expertise and some more help. And that's when I started researching high conflict and podcasts, and I came across your podcast, and that was the first time I had heard you or anything about it. And I started listening on episode 1, and it was just like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my goodness, this is what I went through 10 years ago. I didn't know the word was called high conflict. I didn't know the word was called, narcissism or any of the other words you use, like gaslighting and a lot of these other things. I didn't realize it, but that's what I had gone through. Mm-hmm. And I said, geez, I wish I would have found Brook or met this podcast, 10 years ago. It really would have changed my life. So when we wrote the book, what we tried to do is answer all the questions that we had 10 years ago. Everything from, do I go to the sonogram appointments? How do you get a paternity test? When do you get a paternity test? All the way up to, what is legal custody all about? How much does child support cost? And all the details about parenting plans and parenting coordinators. And when we started to incorporate your lessons into the book, I think it really helped, round out that book and solve some of the answers that we didn't have before we met you, or before we started listening to you. So I thank you for that. You really made it a better book.
I'm glad I was in there helping you figure some of this stuff out. While I'm listening to you guys, I'm thinking about how this is kind of a crash course in custody for the people that are going through this. When you get a divorce, there's, we've had this relationship, we've had these children, whether it's been good or bad or whatever, there's kind of a template there that says, the courts are going to look at this in a particular way and go about this in a particular way. But when we come into the paternity conversation, this is like, most of that template does not exist.
Right.
And the courts have less of a vision about how to take care of this, because in an intact household where a baby comes in, there's co-nurturing, there's this process of the father's there, the mother's there, they're in the house, and this is where we go, and we know how to look at how much time the father's had or the mother's had with the child, and what the parenting styles have been, and what has led up to the separation, kind of getting their head around how to do the parenting plan, if you will, through that vision. But in this case, with people in paternity, that typically is not the case. It's like, okay, we've got to get a paternity test. And then typically the mom has the majority of the time with the child to do that early nurturing and raising, which is obviously to some degree the norm and what you would expect to have happen. But how do we incorporate the father's input and the father's parenting into that when there is a large period of time that there are no parenting plans? I mean, we don't start this from conception. We don't start this during the incubation. We start this at birth.
Yep.
And then there is this large gap of time that happens before we can ever get into in front of a judge or family court services or anybody to start to lay the tracks for the parenting plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that means there is this huge differential in power that if it is not brought in compassionately and equally and inclusively, becomes really problematic for things moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think that the mother really needs to keep the father involved as early as possible. I just think it's very important, because so easily there could be some contention and then, forget about it.
Yeah.
It's tough. And then there's fighting. And
Well, one thing we tell everybody is, there's one of the pages in our book says something to the effect of, the child's not going to have overnights with the father in the first year unless the mother wants it to happen. And that's just because it takes a year to get your court date, right? So even if you file your court papers for custody and visitation on day one after the birth, you're not going to get to a trial where anybody can make that happen until at least a year later, right? So how do you behave in that first year? We think it's very important that, the mother allows visits from the father and encourages visits from the father, and B, the father goes and does those visits. And I remember one of the first things my attorney said to me when my daughter was, born was, get down to Maryland. I was up in New York. Get down to Maryland every week and go see your daughter every weekend, even if it has to be in the house, supervised visit with this person you're not getting along with, doesn't matter. Do it because it's good for your daughter. It's good for your relationships. It's good for your custody battle. You'll end up, looking better in that regard. And it's important. And, Jessica had a situation where her son's father was not getting the same good advice. And as a result, he did not see his son for a number of months.
it was
Early
almost
on.
it was almost a year.
And that really hurt his, ability to go forward from there. Now they overcame that hurdle, but it was a mistake he made that we write about in the book. Make sure you see your child and allow your child to be seen as much as you can in that first year.
Well, the early bonding and attachment with both parents is critical for the good development of the child. And, you know, as you've experienced to a large degree in this process, Jim, having a parent on the other side that is not willing to engage in that process becomes really, really problematic. I mean, it's like, how do you get the pressure on somebody who is absolutely adamant about keeping you from this child, to understand the pressures that are coming their way in terms of relenting to the visitation? And I think there's a couple of things that are important to bring in the conversation here, because one of the things that happens so frequently here that I see is there's a large amount of false allegations that come into the conversation about character assassination, who you are and what you've done and all of this stuff. And overcoming those original false allegations can be problematic, because the judges, when they look at this stuff, have really nothing to refer to unless we can make sure that they have that to refer to. So what I think is important from my end, and I'm interested to hear what your feedback is on this, is that the father in this conversation, in the process of trying to overcome these hurdles that are in front of them, is that they not only do what you suggested, but they start out from square one in terms of taking classes for parenting, understanding and taking classes for child development. If there are issues around anger or accusations around anger, that they overcome that by taking anger management classes or whatever is needed there. Whether it's true or not, we're going to overcome these presumptions out front of how we get there. Taking high conflict parenting classes, taking communication classes, understanding that I think part of the overcoming that power differential is about creating a resume that somebody can look at and go, wait a minute, what I'm seeing here is not what's being presented there. So they can begin to get in that grind and get out in front of the curve, because, you know, emergency hearings to get supervised visitation or something in there, they're costly. They're not always available. And when they are available, we want to make sure that they get the best bang for their buck. Now, on the other side of that, and I'm going to open this for you to comment on too, because you guys have been in the middle of this, you've written that book. But on the other side of that, conversely, for mothers in this situation, sometimes there is a problem on the other side. And for them to be able to really look at the pathway in this for the health for the child, so they can start to set the parameters in terms of what I just said, so that the father can overcome some of these things. And we can start to relax around, we are releasing this precious soul into this relationship with this other person. And to your point, Jessica, this back and forth, if we can find the middle ground in here, is so important for the development of the child.
Yeah. You know, we didn't have any of that, we didn't have any of that severe stuff you're talking about there with, you know, we had to overcome anger management or you know, substance abuse situations. But I think it all kind of rolls into the same kind of advice, which, you know, is similar to what my attorney gave me. So with my situation, my daughter's mother was, you know, very big into attachment parenting, big into breastfeeding. She literally breastfed my daughter every day till age 4, 4 years old. And so she was, you know, it's not that she didn't want me to see her, but she didn't want to let her daughter out of her sight. And so I could come to Maryland as much as I wanted and see her in her home under her supervision. And if the baby cried, she wanted me to hand her over. So, you know, how did we overcome that? Well, I got there every weekend. How did we overcome the problem when, you know, she didn't want me to drive the baby in the car anywhere because it wasn't her car? Well, you know, I made sure I had a good car with a good child, you know, seat in it. And, at the interim hearing, 6 months into the process, the judge said, well, you got to let him start to use his car. And so we had to take these little baby steps, and I had to jump through all these hoops. I started out with 5 or 6 hours unsupervised visits in her hometown, and it was, I didn't really have a choice, right? It was either I take that or nothing, and I could have stomped my feet and said, no, I want nothing. And that's sort of what Bill did, sort of what Jessica's ex did, is he said, if I'm not going to get it all, then I want nothing. And he didn't see his kid for the first, almost a year. And that was a mistake on his part.
And he was getting very poor advice from his lawyer. I just wanted to, as the baby was getting a little older, the whole separation anxiety, stranger danger starts to happen. And I just wanted a short little phasing in, 4 visits with me there. I was still nursing. I would have pumped, and he refused. So we actually had a pretty tough back and forth. Through the court system, he threw out accusations, emergency petitions, hearing what you're talking about. We did have that first year, and that was really tough for me as a young single mom. And he wouldn't do those phasing in, and that's all I wanted from him. And then I would have been much more comfortable letting the baby go, but he refused. He put his foot down. It was a year.
I think that's an important thing. That's a big difference between divorces and baby out of wedlock situation, is when you're dealing with this infant, the mothers are just so emotionally sort of, scared about letting the baby out of their sight. And I understand it, why, makes perfect sense. And it's really hard for good mothers to just say, all right, take the kid for a day or an hour or a week. They don't even want to give it to a babysitter, let alone,
it's tough in the
let
beginning.
alone
It's
somebody you're locked in conflict with.
Right.
So
And this is so normal for mothers just in general, especially with their first child. And a lot of this is first child stuff, right? And they're trying to navigate, what the parameters are of child development, when is a child ready. And, to your point, Jim, you got into, this conversation about attachment parenting, and these are parenting style differences that are going on. And on a level, I'm a fan of attachment parenting. I think that there's a lot of good that comes out of that. But what happens sometimes in the attachment parenting stuff, especially in this arena, it's used as a manipulation to keep the other parent, at bay. And there's not this cooperative coming and going and working out what can actually work. And that place of, I am overprotective of a child, is not healthy for the child, because they don't learn autonomy. They don't learn how to separate. They don't learn how to individuate when they need to. And there's this sense of the world is here and it's not safe, and we need to open that up in there. So, the long periods of breastfeeding that happen in these arenas are often, something that the courts look at and they go, no, we're not going to go down that road. After about a year, we're going to start to figure out how to do this differently, and we're going to allow for more separation.
Yep. I think a year, I'm glad to hear you say a year. That's what we were told, and how we operate also, is about a year, the whole breastfeeding argument loses weight.
But we've got to, we've also got to be aware and compassionate about the emotional pieces, the separation anxiety, the things that, mothers going through in this process, and not to stomp like Bill did in your case and go, if I can't have it all, I'm not going to take anything and I'm going to fight you in court with this. No, more about, I am going to be present. I'm going to make sure that I am there and I am showing up. And if you refuse me, that's documented. And whether you refuse me or not, I'm going to be here. So you figure that out. And most attorneys that I work with will tell their clients that exact same story. It's like, no matter what you do, you got to keep showing up. You got to show that you are tenacious and you're not willing to back off of this. And as you do that, you're going to find your way. I've got a number of clients that are have worked through this piece, and that is the direction that I've always given them in this.
That was Bill's problem. He used a friend who was a
It was like an injury
He was
attorney.
like an injury attorney, and he had no idea what he was doing as far as family law was concerned, and he gave him very poor advice.
So for example, he was asking for sole physical custody at first, which, like, come on, like, it's like laughable. And if he had just, read our book, which wasn't written back then, he would have known that is ridiculous, and don't ask for that, and you won't have, you won't be in this court battle. So that's really what we tried to do with this book, is to just answer these basic questions that people just don't understand. And I think if you have these answers, like if my ex would have known after a year the breastfeeding just doesn't hold much water in court, and maybe she wouldn't have been so willing to fight about it and waste so much time and energy about it.
Mm-hmm.
The attachment parenting thing, just to circle back to that for a second, we sort of came to the conclusion that it's not a bad philosophy, as you just said. It just doesn't work really well for co-parents that have to the child has to go back and forth a lot. And our conclusion was, we've raised a few kids now. We have 3 kids total, 1 between us and 2 from our previous relationships, and we've raised them in a variety of styles. And our conclusion is, it didn't really matter in the long run which style they were raised in. They all sort of ended up in a good place. The difference, though, was that my relationship with the attachment parent was terrible, and I blame, in some degree, attachment parenting. Doesn't mesh well with a co-parent situation. So if you sort of have to do a trade-off between your preferred parenting style and having a good or bad relationship with your co-parent, make sure you give some weight to the relationship with your co-parent, because that is surely going to affect your child as much or more than your attachment parenting or whatever other style you pick.
Well, I think the problem that arises with the attachment parenting model is it's not inclusive.
Right.
And because of the separation of the houses, it can't be inclusive. So it is this notion of it's my way or the highway, I'm going to do this. And there's a lot of things in the attachment parenting model that the courts don't agree with. There's a lot of things in that arena that over time are going to get one or the other parent that's working with attachment parenting, and typically it's the mom in these cases, that's going to lead them into dark alleys that are not going to serve them.
Yeah.
And what I do when I'm working with these mothers in my practice is to let them know that, at some point the co-sleeping is going to become problematic. The family bed is going to be problematic. And it's not going to be just problematic for them in the court system, but it's going to be problematic for the child in the separation that happens with that, where they don't have that in the other house and where that back and forth becomes problematic. And there's ways to dial that back a little bit and to be able to get the most out of the parenting where it isn't that deeply into that style. And that to me comes through the conversations that I'm constantly having around authoritative type parenting, where your presence is always there and you're teaching through that and you're just hanging out. But some of these other nuances about the family bed and long breastfeeding and some of the stuff, and releasing the child into the world a little bit more, is scary, and it's necessary, because that wide gap can cause more problems than it solves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my daughter, she's 11 years old. She still sleeps in the same bed as her mom. But the amazing thing is, when she's with me, she sleeps in her own bed perfectly fine. So, I come back to this notion that the attachment parenting didn't really do anything except to cause a lot of trouble for me and her mother.
Right.
And when I had my first overnight with her when she was about 1 year old, I was scared to death. How's she going to do it? And I had this whole plan. Am I going to, let her cry it out? Am I going to check on her every 5 or 10 minutes? And I put her in the crib, and she fell asleep in 5 minutes and didn't wake up for 11 hours. And it was the first full night's sleep she had ever had in her life. So, these kids are resilient, and I think they, sometimes these parenting styles get more credit than they're due. Right.
So, Jim, for you in this process, I think what you're describing to me is what I believe is the model of a good father in this process. And that is one of, this child's important to me. This child is more important to me than virtually anything else that is going to cause me discomfort in this process. I'm not going to be a jerk. I'm going to be realistic about the process. And I am going to step through this one step at a time without trying to get ahead of myself. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, I mean, you paint me with a nice brush there. I think if I were to go through it again right now, knowing everything I know, listening to 140 of your podcasts and writing a book and having 10 years of experience, that's how I would describe myself. If I'm honest about how was I 10 years ago, I didn't have these lessons you taught. I didn't understand disengage. I didn't and I engaged in a lot of these arguments with her, and it caused me a huge heartache, money down the drain, and all the other things. So, I guess I did some things right back then, but I certainly would have done a lot of things differently. And that's a big part of why we wrote this book, to try to get those things on paper so other people don't make the same mistakes that I did back then.
So let's talk a little bit about about how geography plays into this mix. I mean, you were talking about being in New York and mom being in Maryland and how you navigated that. Yeah. And Mary, you also talked about, I'm sorry, Jessica, you also talked about the geographical difference between you and your ex.
Mm-hmm.
Can you?
That was only about an hour. They were
about an hour apart. I was much longer. So, I guess the first way the geography came into play for me and my attorney explained to me, you're not going to have 50-50 time if you stay 3 or 4 hours apart. You're just not. And so I swallowed that and accepted it. And I realized that's the best thing for my daughter. I don't want her traveling back and forth. And so I didn't fight for 50-50 time. Because it's just one of those moments in your life where you have to realize, are you doing this for you, or are you doing it because it's what's best for the child? And so I didn't even pursue that. I just wanted the regular visitation and extra time. My later battles happened because, of other reasons, my time wasn't being honored and so forth. But
lateness was a big thing.
So geography matters. If you want 50-50 time, you just have to live close together. And I don't know exactly what that number is. Some people say, 45 minutes apart, something like that.
I think that's easier for divorced parents to get 50-50 these days.
Generally, because they start out closer together.
Right.
So that's a problem. Also, when you're talking about geography, and this isn't exactly geography, but, it plays into one of the things you always say, Brooke, is, as went the marriage, so will go the divorce. Well, in my situation, Jessica's situation, there was no marriage. Right. So you don't know how things are going to go. You don't have that roadmap. And when we had dated for a little while, but I really didn't know what kind of person I was dealing with. And I don't know if you did either when you got pregnant. And
well, we dated a little bit longer, and I feel like I did know him, obviously, more, and the type of person that he was. I remember when we first started dating, he had said to me, "I will never raise my voice to you." And even through all the 1 year of that whole custody battle, he never did, and still has never. And we've always had very good, I guess, back and forth in front of the child. We've never argued, screamed. So it stayed that way, which is good.
Jessica and Bill have really been a success story ever since that first year. They really figured out how to do things right and put their son first, and they've gotten along great. Mm-hmm. So despite that, so geography, in the last few years, her son's husband has moved out of state, and I'm sorry, her son's father has moved out of state, and without any arguing, he said, "Look, I'm going to come back and visit my son. I'll stay in an Airbnb. I'll stay for a week or two every month." And he's done that consistently for a number of years now. so that his son can stay in the same school and there's no disruption to his life. He gets to see his dad month in and month out. And so I really give him credit for, stepping up and doing that kind of hardship. It's not easy for him to drive 6-7 hours. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to stop there for a quick second, because this is an important thing for parents to hear out there. One of the things that I think is really, really super important is, again, that show of commitment to the parenting of the child. So if you are living out of state or whatnot, you've got to look at how I want to land in this and how I can take myself out of it and be a part of this child's life ongoing. And that is one of the biggest ways to overcome the hurdles of the custody in this, because when a court starts to see that type of commitment from a parent, they go, wait a minute. I'll have parents in these situations, both married and divorced, or both paternity and divorced, that the parent will move to be close to the child, and then that parent that they move close to be close to the child will move away because they're trying to keep that person from it. And what the courts will say, well, because of the commitment of that move, they'll say, no, we're going to stay right here because this is where it's stable for the child and stuff. So making those movements are so crucial.
Brooke, let me ask you a question that I've gotten this from some clients and readers, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is nationwide. Is it generally allowed that the mother is allowed to move out of state or far away if she wants, or does the father have a right to say, no, you got to stay close?
Well, again, I think it comes really into the conversation about what we're talking about here, because the courts really look at the bonding, the attachment, and the stability for the child. And especially as children get into school age and they've got community and they've got these things going on, if that other parent has moved into that and been a part of that community and been a part of that continuation of the stability of the child, it becomes harder for a mom to move out of state or move out of the area, because it's, we're back to the best interest of the child conversation. And it's like, I can get a better job there, I can do this other stuff there. Well, no, you can figure this out just like the other parent figured this out in that process.
That makes sense, because Jessica had the experience where they started out close together and then she wanted to move further apart for a year or two, and the court made her do the additional transportation to make up for that move. And then later, when her ex moved far away, he's doing the additional transportation to make up for the move. In my case, my attorney told me, hey, if she wants to move to California, this is a free country. You'll get to see your child, but it'll probably be on a different schedule than every other weekend. And you'll have to deal with that if that happens. And I think the difference is I started out at a long distance, 3-4 hours away, therefore easier for mom to make the choice to move to California. Whereas if we started out in the same town, not so easy maybe.
Right. And if you had moved to Maryland.
Yeah. If I had moved to Maryland, she would have been tough for her to leave, I think.
Right. Because again, that's that place of, this is where I'm really making the commitment to do this. A little bit back to where you started in this, around as went the marriage, so goes the divorce. Jim, this is really a place of, I don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me where I sit, I get a really quick read on what's going on. I understand a little bit of the behavior, the psychology of what people are displaying to me. But when you don't understand that, it's like, what the hell is going on here? This makes no sense. We're not looking out for this child. We're not looking out for their best interest going on. How do we get somebody to see what they either can't see or won't see? And we don't have the ability to look into the history book that led to this. We don't know. We've never met their parents. We don't know what their upbringing was. We don't know what their addictions are. We don't know, what traumas they've gone through. And it's hard to get a bearing on that. So we kind of have to sit down and go, okay, I don't need to know that. I just need to know how to navigate this.
Yeah.
Right.
We spent a few pages writing about how, I was a sort of type A type, person. I always wanted to do things on time and by the book and anal, if you will. And my ex was much more the opposite, flexible. And that caused all kinds of arguments between us. And if I had just started earlier trying to understand her brain type, and she had done the same for me, I think we would have avoided a ton of problems. And so, that's one of the things we try to tell people is just try to understand, where your person's coming from, how they think, because you don't know them that well just yet. And you need to somehow fast forward that and try to put yourself in their shoes.
And even over time, understanding some of the personality types that we're navigating in here is hard to do. I mean,
Yeah.
It's living in a bizarre world, and some expectation that is going to change is a little on the ludicrous side. I mean, they're going to be stuck where they're going to be stuck. So,
Right. So I should have just accepted.
You just really have to accept how the person is, as long as
Right.
there's no detriment to the child. That's a different story.
I was getting pissed off every time she was 20 minutes late, and I should have realized that's just how she is.
open a book and read for a while and relax and wait for that to happen. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. With some of the personality types that we're talking about, the intentional is to get you to show your anger so they can point at the anger so they can keep you from seeing the child more.
Yep.
Look at this email, look at this text message, look at all of the vitriol that's here, look at the name calling that's going on. No, we've got to relax around, okay, this is what this is. Now, you just said something, Jessica, about, even to the detriment of the child and some of this stuff. Our children are taking a hit in this unless the parents are cooperative. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are going to have to navigate a level of discomfort. And, my contention is consistently that what you do is what makes the difference for the child's stability and how their nervous system starts to settle. So when you can go, yes, this crazy making is going on over there. Yes, they are bad talking me. Yes, they are enmeshed with this child. Yes, there are these things going on. I can do this different. I don't have to involve the child. I don't have to do it the way they're doing it. I don't have to be controlled by what they want me to do. I just have to do a really spectacular job. And again, I'm liking a lot of what I'm hearing from you guys, and also Jim, as you progress through this stuff, as a realization that attachment parenting wasn't going to be able to go back and forth, but yet you brought your child home, you put her in the crib, and she went to sleep and she adapted to that.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is, and you can report to this or not, is that your attention was on your daughter when she was with you, and that you were well aware of what her needs were, and you were attentive to those.
Mm-hmm.
And that you were also aware of what her developmental needs were, and you were attentive to those.
Yes.
That's what our children need. We're going to blow it as parents. It's just part of the package. But where we can, do our best to really educate ourselves and be in that game, it doesn't matter what the other parent's doing.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And, if I had sort of just realized, the type of, person I was dealing with sooner, I think, I could have jumped and taken the leap to do more of the parallel parenting and stop trying to do so much co-parenting that wasn't going to work
Mhm.
with the person I was dealing with. Can I ask you a question? One thing that I finally got us some results was after about 4 years, we started using a parenting coordinator.
Right.
And that did actually help a lot. And what I've been suggesting to some of our readers and clients is, if you're in a situation, a baby out of wedlock situation, and you're writing your parenting plan, why not just write in that plan that for the first 12 or 24 months, we're going to employ a parenting coordinator to help us with disputes if we need to talk to them. That would have changed my life 10 years ago.
So I think parenting coordinators are good. And by and large, I would stick with that statement. I do a little bit of parenting coordinating myself. And it's not a panacea. I've got clients that have parenting coordinators that one of the parents just uses it as a platform to bitch.
Yeah.
And there are places where the parenting coordinator can make recommendations, but they don't have the authority to override what the court orders say.
Right.
In my contracts, when I do this, and I rarely do because it's frustrating as hell, is to write into my contracts where I have the ability to make final decisions in it. And that doesn't mean that the parent has to go along with it. It just means if it goes to court, that the judge gets to see what my recommendations were and the criteria that I put, which has some weight to it.
Right, sure.
So, when they're using a parenting coordinator, I think, what that document looks like, what the ability for the parenting coordinator to be final decision making on some of this stuff is an important clause to put in it. The other thing that I would say about parenting coordinators is, like in every profession, there's good ones and there's bad ones.
Yep.
And there are also places where the dissonance between the two parents are so far apart and it's so contentious that a parenting coordinator can't be effective in that. But there's also a range, and there's also people out there that are really good. So I would say, if you're going to get a parenting coordinator, really research it. A lot of what will happen is that an attorney will come up with a parenting coordinator and they'll say, I want to use this one, because they have an alignment with them. It's not necessarily because they're good.
Yeah.
So to not necessarily go along with what's put in front of you right up front.
Well, if you get into a situation where, it's your first year or two with your new child and your new custody arrangement, and, the first dispute comes up, oh, it's Christmas break and we have a dispute about how to solve this Christmas break. If you don't have any kind of third party to help you through it, all you have is a big argument.
Right.
That doesn't go anywhere. And if you're two high conflict people, or even just one high conflict, and you can't even communicate, I don't know how, you get through it. So like, that's what happened to me, is that I didn't get through it. We had 3 or 4 more court battles,
Right.
And they didn't solve anything either. And it wasn't until we had this third party to hear us out, that we actually made some progress. So I think that's a very helpful tool.
No, it can be a very helpful piece. And I like the use of parenting coordinators. But even getting to that can be difficult. And what I would say, and most of our listeners have heard this from me multiples of times, is that the initial conditions is what we want to set when we're doing our parenting program, our parenting plan. And we want to be able to really make sure that they are concise, that there are not loopholes in it, that it spells out, the exchanges. One of the things that I've come to really see as interesting is where we look at calendars when we're doing our parenting plans as a weekly calendar every other week. And the interesting thing about every other week is that it changes when somebody goes on vacation. It changes when somebody has a holiday or whatever. It'll kick things out of whack. And I like to go into things like a little more concise about first, third, and fifth, and to really detail how that's going to lay out. So if it's first, third, and fifth, or the fifth weekend is every other time it happens and it occurs, this is the nuance that keeps us out of court. This is the nuance that keeps us out of trouble. And if you don't know it out front, especially in these circumstances where we've got one parent that is trying to manipulate it for whatever reasons they feel the need to control it, becomes problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought I had the most detailed parenting plan in the world. That's what the attorneys told me. But still, we found things to argue about month after month.
Yeah, and every time it comes up and every time we go back to court, we want to make a shift in that parenting plan to deal with that problem so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. So the distance piece we've talked about, new partners.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
New partners are a good thing. You know, in our example, you know, we found each other and certainly had a lot of stories in common, right? Because we both had the mirror image of each other. So that really helped us both cope with it, I think, because, you know.
Right, and there was no issue as far as Bill. He did not. He was very happy that Adam had someone new and as a father figure. He couldn't be there all the time, so he was not jealous in any way. He's been in a long-term relationship. I'm not jealous of this woman at all, so that's good for us.
Right.
They have a very healthy situation, co-parenting situation, and all of them have significant others now. Jessica has me, and her ex has somebody else. You know, my daughter's mother does not have a significant other, and you know, like I think you call it a meshment. You know, her daughter fills that role, or my daughter fills that role.
Right.
You know?
So it's where your ex gets her emotional support is through the child, and there's an enmesh, and there's not a boundary, there's not a parent-child boundary that happens with that, right?
Right.
It's a shame she Mary she refuses to say hello in front of the child, and that's tough. That's not fair to the child. She sees that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's you know, and some cases you have, you know, some kind of argument or something that happened that could justify this stuff. And I remember clearly as day the first time I brought Jessica to one of my daughter's soccer games in Maryland, and instead of, you know, us all standing there on the sideline, mom stayed over here and me and Jessica stayed over there. And despite my attempts to bring us together, you know, she didn't want anything to do with that.
And you know, that's fine, that you know, level of I don't want to engage, you know, if there's that much discomfort, I think to some degree that's okay. But my guess is, and again, speak to this if you will here for a minute, Jim, did things escalate when Jessica came into your world?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, they were already sort of escalated, and maybe that prolonged or you know, brought it up in a different direction. You know, we had a it was Mother's Day weekend, and our parenting plan says that my daughter goes with her mother every Mother's Day. So, but it was my weekend, and so you know, the plan was I was going to bring her back to her mom early on Mother's Day instead of late on that Sunday, and we had stayed at Jessica's house that weekend, which was, you know, a different place. And as soon as my ex found out about that, she went berserk. You ruined my Mother's Day. Not because I was bringing her home late or anything like that. I wasn't. It was just the whole idea that her daughter was in another woman's house with me just made her head explode. And you know, there was F-bombs and everything else. Like it was, you know, and this is a God-fearing religious person that normally never says a 4-letter word, and she just went berserk as soon as she found that out. So yeah, escalated. I think you could say that. Yeah.
Right, because there's a threat here that bond is going to be broken, and this isn't about the child, this is about the mom or the other parent that is caught in this. You broke my heart, you took my child, this is, you know, this is an attack on me rather than this is just normal stuff, and I brought the child to you earlier than I needed to. And
yeah,
but this is some of that we have to bring in. And again, I use these labels only because they talk about what really is going on, but this borderline narcissistic type of behavior of not being able to be separate and feel okay about being separate in that process. So
Yeah.
Where that other partner comes in and things blow up. And I just wanted to, also ring that bell once again.
Yeah,
It's tough.
that's
It's really
typical.
tough. Before Mary knew I was in the picture, I had a wonderful relationship with John's daughter. We
Yeah.
would laugh, and then I think once she realized he was in a relationship, I think she slowly poisoned my stepdaughter over these years. Now
that she's a preteen, she's starting to show a lot of attitude towards my wife.
Right.
And, I'm hoping that sort of passes and goes out of it. But there's definitely some brainwashing. Like I have not been alienated. I won't use that word because I do see her every week. But, I'll give you a good example. When she's with me, I say, good night, I love you. And I get, I love you back. I love you too. When I call her and she's at her mom's house and I say, all right, good night, I love you. She says, okay, bye. She can't say it back because mom might hear.
Right.
And that speaks volumes to me. It breaks my heart for her. I don't need her to say it back. I just feel bad that she can't.
I want to reflect here with this conversation because, again, this is an important piece that often happens for the child in these circumstances. And I want to, reflect back to the step-parent conversations that I've had in previous podcasts. And, for you in this process, Jim, to be able to really settle in with your relationship with your daughter and focus on that piece. And for Jessica to take a step back and allow this to really be almost, not quite, but almost an individual relationship with his daughter, and for you not to take that personally, but to be able to have him be solid in that, where his daughter can come in and not have to interact with you so much, but where you can sit in the background and really slowly build that relationship with her, where she can see that, yeah, this person is sweet. Yes, this person isn't going away. And yes, I don't have to talk about her. So I don't have to get grilled and take that into the other house. Can be a way for Jim to really be able to combat this kind of alienation. And I will call it alienation because that's what it is. And the point of, Jessica being in this as the focal point for it, because without her, she hasn't got anything to attack. Right. But this is that piece that happens with that type of enmeshment. So some things for parents to really understand, as they go through this process, again, whether this is paternity or divorce, and however this new person is showing up, to be able to really know that there are ways to navigate this, but it's not optimal for us. We're sitting and we've got this beautiful relationship between, the two adults, and what we want the child to be able to see is what a healthy relationship looks like. And so when they go into the world, that they can, have some sense of what that feels like. And when we've got a single parent that is playing these types of games, that child is devoid of that opportunity because they are staying single. They are staying single because they're getting this nurturing from here, and they're afraid to step out into the world of relationship because, frankly, they know that they're ill-equipped to do that. And that this thing's going to rotate. So they're holding back, and they're staying in their little cubicle with their whole world wrapped around and living vicariously through their children. So anything else that you guys want to bring into this conversation as we start to wind it down?
I don't think so. I'm looking at our notes here. I feel like we hit just about everything we wanted to talk about. I would just emphasize that, really, whether it's with our book or through you or some other person, just get some information, get some answers, because, for me, at least, answers really would have helped me deal better 10 years ago. And once you get those answers, I think you stop panicking so much, you stop being so defensive, and you can have a better chance of success. And, if you figure out that you're dealing with one of these high conflict type personalities, then you find another tool, somebody like you to work with. And then you can, make some progress.
This is nice. Okay, well, thank you both for joining me. This has been episode 142, Navigating Custody and Paternity, with authors Jim and Jessica Braz, the authors of Baby Out of Wedlock. I've read this book. It's great reading. Pick it up, reach out to them. There's great information here. And again, thank you guys for joining me this week.
Thank you, Brook.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle.
Great.
And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brook has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely, I do. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is Brook at highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brook.